How do you feel about are you happy with the way the profession has gone in more modern times? Or are you not? Is there things that you don't like? Because are we losing, our core, or are we developing? What do you think?
And I think that understanding of the person's illness, condition, diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, understanding how that impacts on them. Yes, physically, but emotionally and psychologically as well.
You're an OT now for 51 years.
That's correct. I mean, that's a bit of a mind-blowing
Isn't
thought
it?
as well, isn't it?
So I'd like to welcome you, Dee, to the Martina Tierney podcast. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
So Dee Christie OBE, I like to say that because you're the first OBE that sat in this chair.
And I'm very, very proud of having it.
Tell us a little bit about that first, Dee. How long have you it? And tell me about that first.
Okay. I'll tell you a little story about it. So the previous year, I received my OBE last year. The previous year I had a fellowship from the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. That blew me away, the fact that three of my colleagues would actually bother to do that for me.
Yeah.
Particularly right at the end of my career, and I'd been retired, etc. So it was a great privilege. And then I wore my badge proudly, etc., etc. Then the year before last, just before Christmas, I was at the OT show, sitting in a cafe, waiting to go down to our stand. And my husband phoned me. He said, Dee, there is a letter for you from Buckingham Palace.
Oh.
And I said, oh, don't tell me they've invited me to a garden party because I've already been once and it's lovely, but, So that's what he said. No. He said, do you want me to open it? And I said, well, I guess you could. So we opened this letter and read out that I was being given an OBE. If I'm honest, one of the most meaningful things in my career, particularly at the end, this end of my life, is that people have bothered to do that for you.
And to recognise you.
Yeah, and that they think enough of you, that they think you're worthy of something like that. I mean, it's a huge amount of work. It takes lots and lots of effort, etc. So I was very proud. I had a very lovely day last April of last year, at Windsor Castle, and I was privileged to receive it from the patron of the Royal College, the Princess Royal, and had a lovely 3 or 4 minutes with her.
You had met her a number of times.
Yes, I'd met her many times while I was chair of council, and it was very nice. It was a bit like the cherry on the cake to have her give me my award.
Well, it was well deserved, I'm sure, Dee. Absolutely, 100%. You're an OT now for 51 years.
That's correct. I mean, that's a bit of a mind-blowing
Isn't
thought
it?
as well, isn't it?
So tell us a little bit about your earlier career, where you started off.
Okay. So I trained at Dorset House, so Elizabeth Casson's College, School of OT. And if I'm honest, when I trained, I'm not really sure that I knew what OT really was about. And it was only in subsequent years that I began to really think about that. Like most OTs then, so 1974 I qualified. And like most OTs, went into the NHS. I got a really enjoyable job at the National Hospital for Neurological Conditions in London. Loved it, really loved neuro rehab, but I hated hospitals.
Yeah.
And I really thought, I can't do this forever and a day. So I left with the intention of actually taking a break from OT. And somebody who knew I loved doing the home visit side, being with a client in their own home rather than on a hospital ward, showed me an advert for the London Borough of Wandsworth looking for OTs to work in the community, and they wanted somebody to work single-handed in Putney. So I thought, maybe I'll give that a whirl. Applied and got the job. And I never left social care. It really was my niche. It was that place where I thought I can be comfortable with what I'm doing. I liked the practicality of it, but I also liked the ability to think through a rehab lens in somebody's own home environment. And soon realised, actually, yes, there's a lot around environmental modification, pieces of equipment, etc. But that conversation, that interaction with the client, that assessment about what it was they wanted, how they wanted their life to be, it just was so much easier in the client's home than it had been on a hospital ward. So I never left, but soon moved into team leader, then setting up a new service in another county, and my career in social care became one of, various leadership roles, which I loved.
So I was reading, you did a thing, the 5 photographs of your career, and I've read a bit of that just to get a little background. And one of the things you said, that occupational therapy is not just about giving out the equipment. It's about, you've said it just there, but maybe give me a bit more about that. It's about what you do before you give out the equipment. And I think we're seen as equipment providers.
Yeah.
Dishing out, equipment, but talk about what we do before we actually hand out the equipment for those of people out there that are going to listen to this for the first time and maybe not know what an OT does.
Yeah, exactly. I ended up much later in my career realising how important that conversation with people is when you first meet them. And that isn't about, necessarily doing hugely complex assessment in that first half an hour, but getting to know what it is that they want to be able to do. And I had so many examples of things that I would never have dreamed of were the priority for the person. We automatically leap into those daily functional things that you have to do. You've got to go to the loo, you've got to get in and out of bed, etc. But some of the most eye-opening were people who wanted, to be able to get down the garden to go into the greenhouse, when that would not have been on my list when I was first in social care. And I think that understanding of the person's illness, condition, diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, understanding how that impacts on them, yes, physically, but emotionally and psychologically as well, and on their family. You and I talked earlier on our trip to the studio here about the role of, those who are caregivers, be they formal caregivers or informal caregivers. It all fell into place for me in social care, that sort of assessment that OTs do in the client's home isn't just about the one thing that comes to your attention initially. It's much bigger than that.
Do you think as OTs we've lost a wee bit of that with the pressures from the NHS pressures? Do you think we're losing that a bit? Because I hate to think that we are, but I fear that maybe we're losing that, maybe holistic.
Yeah.
How can we get it back?
Lots of people who know me well realise that I absolutely hate it when processes drown out the ability to have that interaction with clients.
Yeah.
And I understand the importance of hitting targets, spending budgets wisely, all of that. I've done much of that in my career and been responsible for huge amounts of money. But in the end, if none of that satisfies and meets the needs of the people that we're working with, that's not really very helpful. How we get that balance when you're in that pressured environment of got to get them out of hospital or stop them going into hospital, or not seeing their GP every week or whatever it is, how we get that balance with allowing enough time for the OT to do what's needed. And for OTs perhaps also to understand that sometimes you can come to quick initial decisions that will hold the situation. Yes, you might have to do something later, but absolutely, let's try and come to a conclusion as soon as we can. But it does feel very complex, very process orientated sometimes, and I know many struggle with that, and they find being on that treadmill of getting things done is really difficult. You need to make time for yourself in those situations.
So one of the things you did say earlier is that you felt that you had like a parallel career, that you were an OT, but then you were involved with the college and with the Casson Trust. And I know you're very passionate, and I can't wait to hear a little bit more about Elizabeth Casson, because you're very passionate about it. You almost feel as if you do know her.
Yes, I do.
So tell us about your role at the college first, and then we'll go on to your role at Casson Trust.
Okay. I think I realised as I got into sort of team lead type roles that OTs are really good once they stop perhaps being a little bit apprehensive about stepping into influential roles where maybe they can get the ear of others. And that might be, certainly in my career, that was always politicians. So your local county councillors, they were the people that held the purse strings. And I always wanted to get to know them because that would mean that perhaps they would give the OT service more money to spend, or they would understand better what it was that we could offer.
So do you still recommend that's 100%?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you don't work in social care, find out who your local MP is. And, book a session in your surgery or write them a letter, but make sure they know what OTs do, because I think politicians still don't. But I always felt that our sort of innate skills were really, really beneficial in those leadership and governance roles. And because I'd progressed from being a frontline clinician to being a head of operations, I'd had a lot of practice at that. But I also felt so passionate about OTs contributing in that way. I had always been a member of my regional group with the Royal College. Across the 50 years, I've probably been a member of 5 or 6 regional groups. I've sat on a lot of their committees, etc. And ultimately, I ended up on council as a social care representative. And whilst I was on council, Jenny Butler was chair of council at that time. And I watched the process of what went on in council. And what you have to remember is council isn't just about the clinical side of OT, it's about the governance of the organisation. It's there to ensure that the organisation delivers what's needed. And I watched how council was working and thinking, I'd quite like to have a go at being chair of council.
Very good.
And decided I would stand, and was very delighted to be elected. And had, I think, a really interesting 3 years. It opened my thinking to how some of those parallel roles, you can really take what you do as an OT into those. I got very interested in good governance. I was lucky enough to work with good people within the organisation at that time, who were aware of how important it was to understand what being a trustee of an organisation was. And yeah, I was sad when my term came to an end, and all
You
terms
can't
of
renew?
office, you can't go on forever.
No, 3 years?
3 years, well, 5 years is the maximum, but I'd already done 2 as a council member for social care, so I could only do 3 more as a chair. But it was a very, very enjoyable time. Lots of demands. It was interesting going to the 4 countries and seeing how different OT was in the different parts of the UK, etc.
And what did you think of OT? In Northern Ireland, do you think that we're well connected to the college?
Well, it's interesting. At the time, there was a great deal of difficulty getting a Northern Ireland rep on council. We did eventually, and then I think Greg Kelly took a term as well. It felt like, because the structure of health and social care in Northern Ireland is different, that it was a bit of a struggle. It got better, but I think that happens across the board with lots of things. It goes up and down. And if I'm honest, some of it is about OTs both having the time and capacity and the willingness to step into those slightly unusual roles, to be a bit braver and say, do you know what, I'd quite like to be on council, or I'd like to sit on that committee, and putting themselves forward or getting somebody to nominate them. It's not easy, because obviously you're going to give your time for...
It's all
voluntary, you do it for nothing. It's a voluntary role. So there is a limit to what you can do. But it makes such a difference if you can get people engaged. And it adds a huge... You learn a lot that you can take back into your working life.
So then what about the Casson Trust? Did that come after the council? So tell us about it, because that's your passion, I can tell that.
I think I've been very lucky, actually, in my retirement, because I was chair of council from 2006 to 2009. I then had... 5 or 6 years left before I retired, and I did a lot of project work in my head of operations role. Launching a county-wide reablement service, for example, so taking the home help service, the home care service, and transforming it into something else. And that kept me very busy for those last 5 years of my career. But when I retired, I said, I'm retiring from the job, not from the profession.
Right, okay.
So initially, I did 5 years' work with NICE. Again, loved it. Another huge organisation.
That was voluntary as well?
Yes.
Yes.
So I applied to chair a guideline committee. The guideline committee was around intermediate care and reablement, a passion of mine in the last part of my career. So I spent 5 years with a committee of something like 19 members writing this guideline, which still exists and is still used, etc. I always laugh because I think I'm the only AHP who has ever chaired a NICE guideline committee. And it was, again, one of the most enjoyable things. Very testing because NICE expect gold standard. So they're quite a hard taskmaster to their committees. They want the very best out of it. And while I was doing that, somebody said, so what are you going to do next? I said, I think it's probably time that I completely stop. And in my last 6 months while I was chairing that committee, I had a letter from the then chair of the Elizabeth Casson Trust, that's Annie Turner,
yes,
who had written to, I think there were 4 or 5 OTs, to say, would you be interested in being considered to become the next chair of the Elizabeth Casson Trust? And I thought, that sounds interesting. I knew about the trust, but not very much.
And
So
did you know much about Elizabeth at that time? Because you talk about Elizabeth as if it's somebody that you really know personally.
Yeah. I knew a little bit about her. I knew she was our founder. I knew she created Dorset House, where I trained. I knew she wasn't an OT. And I knew she was part of the famous and maybe somewhat infamous Casson family, because there was her cousins and close family members are all in the arts, the theatre and painting and drawing, etc. So I knew a little bit about her. So when I got the letter, I thought, yes, I will. And again, was delighted. I think there were 4 OTs interviewed. So I've served 2 3-year terms, and this is my last year. And if I'm honest, I would say it's one of the very best things I've had the chance to do in my career, because it is about what Elizabeth intended, which is an organisation who wants nothing more than to further the profession. It isn't about anything other than that. It's there just for OT. And I think Elizabeth... So you have to remember, she was born in the late 1880s, so she's very much a woman of that time, lived through the First World War, lived through the Spanish flu pandemic that followed, lived through the Second World War. There are parallels for OTs now, because we are living through such times, and COVID, I think, was something similar. But you have to remember, Elizabeth wasn't an OT. She trained as a psychiatrist, she trained as a doctor. Again, unusual in the, sort of late 1900s. Around 1919, that sort of period, it was unusual to train. But her work really started before she trained as a doctor, because she worked as, would you believe it, a housing manager. Oh, there's a lovely connection with OT, with Octavia Hill. Octavia, who was later the founder of the National Trust, developed a housing complex in London, several of them, with gardens, etc. And Elizabeth was her housing manager, so would go and collect rent, look after people's well-being, find out if the kids were doing okay, help them when they were not well, etc., etc. And I think it was that relationship with Octavia, that sort of socially motivated, wanting to actually improve society, that started her thinking about OT.
Tell what sort of a lady, you said that the memorial lecture that is given every year in her honour is meant to reflect her ethos or her work ethic or her personality. So tell us a little bit about what that is, because you've researched her a lot.
Yes, I mean, last year was the Trust's 75th anniversary, so as a consequence of that, we decided that it was time that she had a new biography, not one that was published. We were going to get it printed.
This one
There
here?
it is.
Mm-hmm.
We would ask Annie Turner, who had been previous chair, because Annie's a writer,
Yeah.
to pen it for us. But we wanted more about Elizabeth the woman in it, not just Elizabeth who found OT and founded Dorset House. And I think we found all of that information about her. Yes, much of it was known, but it had never been brought to the fore before.
Where did you find it?
All over the place. There's a lot of it in an earlier biography, and you might recall that there was a major piece of work that the Royal College commissioned back in the early noughties around the history of occupation. So some of it was in there. But Annie did a lot of research for us. She did a lot more finding out about Elizabeth the psychiatrist, for example, and more about why, when Elizabeth created Dorset House, for example, she wasn't the first head of school. She was the medical director. No, you will need somebody who's going to train as an OT to be head of school, not me.
Yeah.
And of course, Elizabeth died in 1951 anyway, so and she was still quite a young woman then.
Yeah.
But she had always talked about how important people's daily activities was to their recovery. If there's some snippets of her diaries in the archive that's held at Oxford Brookes University, and you can just get flashes of Elizabeth, this absolutely determined woman who was a really good businesswoman. You know, she incorporated Dorset House to protect it, then created the charity, and all of her assets became ours when she died, as it were.
Yeah.
And the money that she left is invested, and we provide just about anything and everything that we think is going to be valuable to OTs.
To OTs,
And it's provided free to OTs. Yes, you have to apply. You've got to justify why you want to do things.
But it's free.
But
And what sort of things? You talked about mentorship. Sorry. What
no,
else?
I was going to say, I think the lovely thing is that in the last 5 years, Annie spent a lot of time as previous chair just building the governance of the organisation, because it is a charity. It has to be run properly, and we're responsible for the resources that Elizabeth left and what she intended. So I've been privileged really to be much more outward looking, which suits my style, much more willing. Elizabeth, I think, was very bold. She was quite brave with some of the things that she did. You know, going to her brother and saying, can you lend me however many £100 it was to buy this building because I'm going to create a school for training OTs. You know, not many women in that era did that sort of thing. And I think the Trust has sustained that, you know, being bold, being brave, being pioneering, but also being realistic. The important thing about the Trust, as she created it in my mind, OT existed, it was there in America, it was there in Scotland. But actually what Elizabeth realised, we've got to train our OTs, we've got to actually make sure that they are properly trained. So it was that whole creation of profession, and I think the Trust now just sustains that. So we have everything from grants for, you know, courses, etc., or funding for postgraduate qualifications, masters, PhDs, etc., postdoctoral stuff. But we've gone out of our way to create a number of streams that are more about how do we help OTs build their confidence, sustain that, so that they can think about stepping into some of those roles that maybe they think, no, I can't do that. So we have a mentoring program, we have a leadership program. We're going to be doing some stuff this year later. I won't steal the thunder of the Trust too much about, you know, what do you need to think about if you want to become a trustee. There'll be a program around that. We've done some international development stuff supporting OTs in East Africa who are diplomats, but they need a BSc if they want to go further. And anything and everything in between.
And how do you promote, how does the OT on the ground, like the everyday OT, how do they find out about the Casson Trust?
Well,
what are you doing to...
We're doing this sort of thing.
All right, very good. I'm glad we're part of that.
We are a virtual organisation, so we don't have an office space, we don't have a building that we go to. Our executive team has just 3 people in it. So an executive officer, a deputy, and our administrator. And they sit in different parts of the country, actually all in the West at the moment, unfortunately. Our Board of Trustees has got 12 trustees. 9 of those are OTs, but we also have 3 lay trustees. One is a lawyer, a solicitor. One is a finance person, and one is somebody who has got media and PR background with another charity. So the trustees hold the organisation together in terms of its strategy and the operations deliver. And we use social media as much as we can. The last 2 years we've been to the OT show with a stand.
You find that good?
Oh, do you know, we could have got given away 3 times as many of Elizabeth's biographies as we did at the because people were fascinated. They came to talk to us about it. And just taking every opportunity to try and talk about what the trust does, why it does it. The difficulty, I think, is always you will never get to all of the OTs. That's just not possible. It's unrealistic. And getting enough people who know about you who then will tell their colleagues. It's a bit like, you drop a pebble in a pond and the ripples. So more and more people know. So for a good example is we run a leadership program. It's a personal development leadership program. It's not run by an OT. It's run by somebody who's got 35 years experience of that whole area of work. And when we started it, we were just in year 4. When we started it just after COVID, we had about 45 applicants.
Okay, good. For how many places?
That was
that was the number. Right, okay.
We now have 60 seats, but we get 3 times as many applicants for it. So the word is out there.
That's good.
And, there's a consideration, obviously, to think about, well, how can we support people more? Because they hear how good the programme is and they want to do it themselves. But we don't have the ability to offer more places because otherwise that spoils the course. The same is true of our mentoring programme. So we have usually 60 or 70 pairs of mentors. Some of our mentors will mentor, they may be retired, so they say, do you know what, I can mentor 3 OTs this time around. And it's been, again, extremely well received. People love that concept of somebody to actually have a safe conversation with about how you want to develop your career, a particular issue that you're concerned about.
Very good. How do you feel about are you happy with the way the profession has gone in more modern times? Or are you not? Is there things that you don't like? Because are we losing, our core, or are we developing? What do you think? Somebody that's been there 50 years. I'm not that far behind you right now.
We could probably compare notes, Martina. I don't feel concerned. I think, going back to what we were saying earlier, I think the pressure in the system is something that I worry about, because it doesn't seem to allow therapists to have the time and the capacity to think about their development. And I think that's particularly true around leadership development. Much of my career has been about leadership roles. And if we don't have OTs in those leadership roles, then we can't be influential. And I get the sense sometimes that people don't have the confidence to walk into those roles. Hence us, continuing to offer the leadership program and the mentoring program in particular. So I think we need to be braver about those things. I suppose the other thing that I sometimes wonder is how good are we at learning from the past experiences of people like you and I who've done lots of things. Can we do more to support the up-and-coming therapists? How do we disseminate research evidence in a better way? We're privileged to have Avril Drummond as one of our trustees at the moment. Something Avril and I have talked about endlessly. It's great doing research. You've got to get people to use it. Yes,
we were talking to Charlie Chung about that. Actually, he's very good at that. he's very good at doing the research, but he's very good at getting it put into practice. We actually had that conversation.
Yeah, and I think we need to do more of that. And it's probably something the Trust will think about going forward. What can we do to actually encourage that? You know, we have small pots of money for research. We have an Innovation Award and a Pump Priming Award, but we also offer once a year £100,000 pot for research for those who are maybe further on in their research career. And that's great. But then how do we enable them to take their research into their workplace and for others to benefit from it
to use it
and to pass it on? So that confidence to use that evidence, I think, is sometimes lacking. And sometimes I think people are a bit scared of the research word and the evidence word. And maybe if you think about some of the things that you do while you're working, that's creating
evidence.
And we're not good at sharing that.
No.
I know when I was first working in West Sussex, where I helped set up the service, I was there for, 35 years in the end, and we created a sort of regional just social care network, nothing to do with the college. And the thing that was really helpful with that, we used to meet quarterly, and we would just share our initiatives and how we did it. Why did we approach it in a particular way? What did we learn from that? I don't know how much opportunity there is for OTs to do that sort of networking now.
Funny, we were talking. We were talking as we walked around the factory about lean and lean processes, and the comparison with occupational therapy and lean. And one of the things that we do here, and we do very well, and we try to encourage, is to share ideas among the team. It's a Japanese term called yokoten, and we're sharing, and Japanese are very much into that, when you get a good idea and sharing it out. And that's what we need to do more in OT with the research, is how do we share it?
Yes, exactly. And how do we share some
good ideas?
Yes. Exactly. Even, not just research, but things that you do in your workplace where you've come up with a good approach to it. You get good outcomes for your patients, your clients. Why don't we tell our neighbours about that? Why don't we, talk to other NHS trusts or to other social care departments? I suppose the dilemma for me, and the bit where I think there is the challenge currently, is there the capacity in the working day for OTs to be doing that? Do they feel that they've got the time and the confidence to do that? And I think maybe that's certainly something that the Casson Trust is interested in. How do we allow people to sort of put their head above the parapet a little bit more? But when you're under pressure and you've got to get clients discharged from the ward, or doing stuff to help them stay at home, that becomes your priority.
It does.
But if you don't look after yourself and your own development, then you're not actually going to benefit your clients anyway, because you just become stuck.
That's right. So I want to get on to your retirement and what you want to do in it, because that's a whole new phase of your life. But before we do that, just clear up that misconception that we have about the Casson Memorial Lecture and the Casson Trust, because I think everybody gets that confused.
Yes, most people think that the lecture belongs to the Trust. It doesn't. The Trust endowed it in 1970, so the idea came from the Trust, and I had the lovely experience recently of we paid for the archive of Elizabeth Casson and Dorset House to be created, and it's held at Oxford Brookes University. So I know the archivist there very well. And I said to her, do you know anything about how and, what happened? So she said, leave it with me. And she found all the minutes of the meetings about how the Casson lecture was set up.
Right, very good.
So you've got to think, that was 1970-ish. That's a long time ago, 50 years ago. And it seemed that there was a discussion with, it was not the Royal College then, it was just the College of OT, that they would host the lecture. And actually the Casson Trust paid for it to be set up, and I think paid for it for about 10 years. That stopped, and the lecture became something that the Royal College took on and did. And continue to do. And
it is annual. They do one every year.
Yes,
yes.
I think there's only 1 year when it didn't happen, and I'm not. And I think that's when the World Federation's Congress was in London, so there wasn't a conference that year. But I suppose the idea of a memorial lecture, and I'm lucky that I've been to the Canadian and American and Australian Association equivalents, and they are all about, making a connection with the people in whose name it is given. So I like to think that the Casson Lecture now is about the things that Elizabeth was proud of, being a bit braver, being excited by doing new things, by sharing, how you could do things. And that sort of bold pioneering spirit. So that sometimes the lectures are very, very much about what the person is actively involved in. Sometimes it's more reflective, or sometimes it's actually very motivational. So if you were to think in the last couple of years, if you looked at, say, Katrina Brannigan's and Anita Atwell's lectures in the last 5 years, really motivational stuff, not about necessarily the work that they do.
No.
But really trying to raise messages, trying to raise ideas. I think that's a really good connection with Elizabeth. But so is, for example, what Charlie was doing in his lecture, talking about how important it is to open doors and to be brave enough to walk through them, to actually get on with, okay, so that person's offered a helping hand, that's a door I'm going to work through, etc.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that perhaps these lectures should be something that we take the messages from them and use them as a platform for delivering ideas.
Yeah.
I know in my career there have been a number of lectures that actually were light bulb moments for me. I'm lucky enough, there is a publication where all the lectures, right up I think until around 1970 or 80 something, together, and I've reread some of those, and they really are very inspiring. You can get them all online. You can find the list, etc. So I like the idea that perhaps, and I think, having a think about how the Casson Lecture might grow and develop. It's a conversation I had recently with somebody at the Royal College, with Nikki at the Royal College, just in terms of, that would be quite exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So we'll see. Who knows what will happen? But it's very definitely, the lecture sits with the Royal College. Doesn't mean to say that we're not interested. Yeah. And you have to remember, another lovely little story is, before writing the biography, Annie and I went to London to meet 3 of Elizabeth's great nieces, who are now ladies in their 80s, all of whom have had fantastic careers. But many years ago, the one niece who was missing from that lunchtime do actually did the introduction to the Casson Lecture.
Yeah.
Oh, it was lovely because she lived with Elizabeth for a while, so she was able to reflect on that.
So are people invited, or do people apply? Just if anybody's listening that is interested.
Nominated, I think. I'm not sure what the process. It used to be, way back when I was chair, that people were nominated, and they were, obviously their nominations were evaluated, but the final decision was made by council as to who would actually deliver the lecture. But I'm not sure what the process is now. Sort of lost touch with some of that.
You might have lost touch with that, but you haven't lost touch with occupational therapy.
No.
Because you said you've retired from your job, but not from the profession. So tell us what your plans are for your retirement.
Well, it's interesting. My husband doesn't believe that I won't do something after standing down from the Casson Trust, and I'm pretty.
You're
sure
still there until February.
I'm there until February
26.
Till April 26th, primarily because Sam Shan, who is going to follow me, people will know Sam is currently president of the World Federation. We're delighted that she was appointed, and we had a incredibly competitive field, and these wonderful OTs, all of whom wanted to do this. It really excited us. But we're delighted that Sam's joining us, but obviously until she steps out of her World Federation president role, she can't take on both. That would just be so. I've agreed to stay on until April, another 6 months. That's no hardship to me. It's a pleasure. After that, I'll probably stay as a mentor with the trust. I enjoy that. But there comes a time when you think, I'm getting now quite distant from the real working world that many OTs are in. So maybe just another year. I'll probably stay connected with the trust in some way. There's bound to be stuff where, you know what happens. So you get a phone call someday, can you remind us what we thought about that? Why did we do that? Could we invite you to talk about that? But something like that will happen. But I'm not going to actively look for a role.
No.
You know, it's probably time just to step away from that. But I'll always be an OT.
Yeah. But you were saying also that you feel that the contribution that the retired members can make isn't really...
I think retired OTs have a lot to offer. There's a lovely a Facebook group called Retired or Retiring OTs. It was set up by a couple of old friends of mine, and there are about 98 of us now in that group, all of whom are doing stuff. Many of them are trustees, many of them are doing voluntary work, many of them are doing community projects, etc., etc., or just want to stay in touch with other OTs, not to do anything in particular, but there's a whole body of knowledge in there, particularly those who are more recently retired, who do still have that connection with the working world, who would love, you know, to be available. And I'm sure there'll be opportunities. But
the mentorship would be a big thing.
Actually, quite a number of our mentors are retired OTs, and they do it because they, yes, they may not be as up-to-date clinically, but they've either been specialists or leaders or whatever, and they know what it feels like to work in that environment. And sometimes mentoring is much more about a conversation than necessarily coaching somebody on a clinical level. There's lots that retired OTs can do. Not that you're retiring, I hope, Martina.
Well, you don't know what that was. I was going to put the question to you. What do you think someone like me? What would be the most beneficial thing a retired OT could do?
Well, I suppose it depends on whether or not you do want to retire and separate from things that you worked with, but still use your OT skills, for example, in some voluntary work. Or like me, who wanted to take actively my OT skills into something that I knew would produce something for OT. So initially with NICE, chairing the guideline committee on intermediate care and reablement, well, that's the world of AHPs, and particularly reablement and OTs. So wanting to take that body of knowledge into that, because I knew about it, I had experience of it. And to a certain extent, I suppose the same with being the chair of the Casson Trust. I got very interested in good governance, how organisations are run, what charities are all about. So I suppose you have to first decide what's your energy level and what is it you want to do. Some people just want to stop completely and do something completely different. So, what is it that would excite you? And
you have
what
to
is
find
it that sort of makes you want to sort of get on?
Yeah.
And sometimes, I have some retired friends who did a little bit to start with, and then their grandchildren became more important, their garden became more important, and they've drifted into that because that's what they wanted to do.
The most important thing is to stay active and meaningful activity, as we say, into retirement.
Yes, I think so, and staying interested and being open to things. But the nice thing about retirement is you get to say exactly what you want to do. You're not tied by what the job is expecting you to do or whatever. It's your choice. It's for you to decide, do I want to spend time on that, or would I rather go and prune my roses?
Well, Dee, it's an absolute pleasure meeting you today.
It's lovely being here.
And to talk to you. And your passion for occupational therapy is definitely very infectious, and it makes me want to keep going and do something more in the next 10 years. There's 10 years between us, I think we discovered.
Maybe think about, perhaps I could be a trustee somewhere or something like that.
You never know, but it's been an honour and a pleasure. And congratulations on all your achievements as well, and you deserve them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.